Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And on the program, I apologize already to Abayomi and our audience in advance and right now to the viewers and listeners. I didn't prepare for the country I was supposed to prepare for today, Namibia. I was dealing with some personal drama. My sleep apnea was flaring up badly, and some other issues in my personal life, and just couldn't work last night or during the day. So next week we will explore the history of Namibia and its current affairs. Today, however, we'll be covering some current affairs that's been happening in the belly of the beast of the Anglo-American Empire. But before we do that, there are two topics related to South Africa that I want to talk with Abayomi about before we get into some current affairs. So first off, we welcome back to the show Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Reports. And don't forget, folks, to share us widely. Recently, Facebook blocked me from sharing our content widely. So again, please share, donate, and let's get on to it. So first off, Abayomi, welcome back to the program, and apologies for not
You.
preparing my homework and us talking about Namibia.
Well, we can get to it. It's another fascinating country, just like South Africa that we discussed last week.
And well, thank you for that. Now, actually, about South Africa, though, because last week's episode was quite an epic episode. But there were two things related to South Africa that I did want to ask regarding the history of apartheid and some current affairs and some of the demographics. That's in South Africa. But the first question I wanted to ask you was this. Now, in our series on Africa, we've explored the history of slavery, colonialism, settler colonialism, and ongoing imperialism, or as some like to call it, neocolonialism. And it's been enlightening to learn through many of the African countries, France's reactionary and counter-revolutionary role in the world, not least in Africa. And regarding South Africa, I wanted to ask you, what was France's real role, and how did the solidarity movement in France push the governments of Mitterrand and Chirac to put some forms of BDS on apartheid South Africa? And then my only follow-up question to that is, how do you compare France's attitudes towards the apartheid regime compared to the the Eastern European communist bloc regarding apartheid specifically in South Africa? I'm very curious.
Well, France was a former colonial power. They still have colonies today. So we have to start from that vantage point. And they did participate in the whole process of colonizing Africa. Now, they did have the Huguenots, which is a French grouping that had traveled to South Africa. They were part and parcel of the racist apartheid system, settler colonial system that developed. And during the 1970s and 1980s, they were put under pressure, just like the United States, Britain, and the other Western imperialist countries, to involve themselves in disinvestment from institutions that had business dealings and holdings in the then Republic of South Africa. But they tried to play a role where they were mediating. For example, there was a Western contact group in regard to Namibia, which we'll discuss next week, which several Western capitalist countries were part of. They were seeking a diplomatic solution to the problem of colonialism in Namibia, but they were not the critical force that brought about the independence of Namibia and later the fall of the apartheid system in South Africa. So, yes, France is clearly an imperialist country, and they were involved in the whole colonial process in Africa, including the Southern Africa region as well. Even though they did not have colonies in the Southern Africa region, they were not hostile to colonialism as a whole in the subcontinental area.
Interesting. And when now there was a solidarity movement against apartheid South Africa in France, which I think at the peak of all of the at the peak of how should I say? I guess during the last chapters of apartheid, which was the 1980s, where the Cold War and the war against apartheid South Africa was really at its peak. Certainly, its most violent. There was an anti-apartheid movement, solidarity movement in France, which did manage to get some forms of the which did manage to pressure the French government of Mitterrand, who was also in a power sharing arrangement with Jacques Chirac, who I believe was the prime minister when Mitterrand was president. Mitterrand of the Socialist Party. To go, I don't remember what it was, either Rally for the Republic or the UMP, but anywho, they were the anti-apartheid movement in France was able to pressure that government to engage in some forms of BDS. What were the achievements that the anti-settler colonial movement in South Africa, the anti-South, yeah, what were they able to do to pressure Mitterrand and Chirac to engage in at least some forms of BDS?
Well, they paid lip service to the idea that political prisoners should be released and that there should be a democratic system inside the country. But as I said, this played a role, but it was not a critical role. In Britain, there was a much larger anti-apartheid movement, is what it was called. And they had huge rallies there, and they had a lot of anti-apartheid activists who were taking refuge there. Even people such as Oliver Tambo had been there for a period of time, and others were there. So because it's a English-speaking state, both Afrikaner and English, I think it had more of an impact in regard to the anti-apartheid movement. And a similar situation in the United States, even though it was slower to take off on a mass level, but after the mid-1980s, it became a major issue in the United States.
Yeah. Anywho, I find that fascinating in and of itself because and well, you already explained sort of what sort of the dynamics of why that existed. But why do you think the anti-apartheid movement in France wasn't able to get more concessions out of the French government of Mitterrand and Jacques Chirac? I'm very curious your response to that.
Well, I believe that they may not have been as large, and the language barrier between France and England could also have been a factor. But yeah, there was a lot of support, though, for the liberation movements in Southern Africa among the French people, particularly the French left and the youth movement, and also trade union movements as well, because you had the CGT
Yeah.
in France, which had been in the past connected with the French Communist Party. And they, of course, were supporters of the ANC and the South African Communist Party. So yes, they did have an impact in that regard. But the anti-apartheid movement was a global movement. It was all over the world. And people were calling for the end of apartheid, for the freedom of Nelson Mandela and other political prisoners. And the same situation in Namibia as well, because Namibia, in essence, was a fifth province of the Republic of South Africa under apartheid. And although they never fully incorporated Southwest Africa, as it was called, prior to Namibia. In effect, their troops were there. They were under their rule, under their laws. So yes, that's what happened in that regard.
Uh, are you able to are you able to enlighten our audience comparing how France engaged in BDS compared to the Eastern European communist bloc? The reason why I asked that is because it's because first of all, I think uh, there's a lot of first of all, I mean, anybody who watches this program knows that I don't engage in anti-communist leftism. Once upon a time I did, but no more. And I think it's just fascinating, hearing Yves Engler when he was talking about how Canada was how Canada was pressured to engage in some forms of BDS. He says that compared to many of the black majority countries on the world, in the world, including the Caribbean countries, they were much better compared to both Canada and France. He emphasized France, and he says, and he also says that if you compare Eastern European communist countries, their engagement with the BDS movement against apartheid South Africa, he says they were much better compared to Canada, France, and Britain and and the U.S. put together. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, especially when Eve Angler and other anti-imperialist historians have also revealed that when Patrice Lumumba was overthrown and murdered, the precursor to the modern day NDP, the CCF, which was a farmers, a socialist, populist party, they actually supported, and a lot of the unions, the overthrowing of Patrice Lumumba, which is shocking given that Patrice Lumumba was I hate the term, but he was a democratic socialist or a social democrat. Certain, so that's scandalous in and of itself. And then and then when you compare the solidarity efforts of Eastern European communist governments and the anti-apartheid movement there, the anti-colonial movement there, the Africa solidarity movement there, again, it's just a shocking night and day difference. So I was wondering if you could enlighten us a little bit about that when we compare France to the Eastern communist bloc.
In actuality, there was no comparison. The Comecon countries were firm and solid in their support for the liberation movements in Southern Africa. And that was true of both Namibia as well as South Africa, also Zimbabwe, Angola, and the others. So yes, they trained fighters, they trained technicians from those countries to prepare them for national independence. And in the German Democratic Republic, for example, they published a book on the history of the resistance movement in Namibia, going all the way back to the 19th century. The book was entitled Let Us Die Fighting, which was a quote from one of the traditional Namibian leaders during the early part of the 20th century when they were fighting German colonialism. So yes, there was no comparison. Even Yugoslavia, for example, was very open to the Southwest Africa People's Organization. They did a lot in terms of hosting their cadres and doing military training for them. Also, if we want to talk about the Asian socialist states, Democratic People's Republic of Korea had been staunch supporters of SWAPO as well as the ANC. And there's visits that took place involving Sam Nujoma, who was the founding president of Namibia, the Republic of Namibia, and his delegation to the DPRK way back in the 1980s. So, yeah, you cannot compare the socialist countries with the imperialist countries in regard to support for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And clearly, no military support went to the liberation movements from the Western imperialist countries. And also the People's Republic of China. They trained the first cadres of the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, the military wing of the Southwest Africa People's Organization. They also supported the ANC as well, as was revealed in a extensive interview by Oliver Tambo in 1983. So there is no comparison. You had grassroots on a groundswell level support for the people in South Africa and Namibia and the other countries in the region, but the governments continue to support the racist apartheid regime in practice, even though they may have paid lip service through the Western Contact Group that I mentioned earlier, that was set up during the late 1970s, and other, constructive engagement. The bogus profile of U.S. foreign policy in Southern Africa was clearly designed to maintain the apartheid settler colonial system as long as possible. So there is no comparison in actuality.
That's unbelievable. And we are going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the historic Palestine, since there's so much going on there, unfortunately, Lebanon and so forth. I wanted to ask you then this question. Nowadays, ever since Eastern Europe has been liberated, so to speak, from the tyranny that is communism and Stalinist adjacent Stalinism and so forth like that, Eastern Europe has only gone more and more to I don't even call it I don't even call it the center right or the soft right. It's the far right, and it's not even liberal democracy. I call it libertarian democracy and so forth. And and it's I think it's kind of it's sort of stunning that so many Eastern Europeans, including the left, there still wants so badly to be aligned with Western Europe, the Western world. I guess they certainly want social democracy and so forth like that. But it's stunning how nowadays, if you just look at the response of a lot of the Eastern European states, uh, either individually or through the European Union or through their membership in NATO, how reactionary their foreign policy is, not least when it comes to historic Palestine, and as you say, them paying lip service to the stupid two states delusion. Both sides need to stop doing violence, but Israel has the right to defend itself, and still giving arms to Israel and whatnot, and then propping up the corrupt Palestinian Authority, which we could argue if it ever was a force for good, but certainly over the decades has been nothing more than a colonial viceroy to the occupation, especially in the West of Bank. And I think people would be very shocked if they compared Eastern Europe as a region when it was under communism compared to now. I mean, it's just very stark how their foreign policy was way more progressive and truly socialist, anti-imperialist. I was wondering if you could talk to us about that, because that's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is over the last 35 years or more. It's been the greatest counter-revolutionary movement, I think, in modern history, particularly if you look at the 20th century, because as I mentioned, the Comecon countries supported the liberation movements. They were committed to scientific socialism. Yet today, none of that has been revived. Even after the collapse of the late 1980s, the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, which was illegal. What Gorbachev did, there was no approval. He just liquidated the country. Now, under the current United Russia and Vladimir Putin's administration, they have been able to build back authority and also reconstruct the economy, but they are not moving towards socialism. Now, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which still exists, the Russian Communist Party, and so forth, they're still the largest opposition party within the Russian parliament. But I don't see them being anywhere close to taking power again, particularly on an electoral level. But look at Ukraine as an excellent example. You know, you had in Ukraine, of course, elements that supported Nazism and fascism, even back during World War II. And that was a big struggle inside of Ukraine. But today, even though the Ukraine had abandoned socialism, they decided to become independent of the Russian Federation as early as the early 1990s. Yet they have moved into the fascist realm of influence. Just the other day, I was reading about a ceremony to honor one of the supporters of the Nazis in Ukraine during World War II. And of course, it's clear that Zelensky is just a puppet of these fascist forces. When the Maidan, so-called Maidan uprising or Maidan revolution took place in 2014, they were attacking statues to V.I. Lenin, the Red Army, who in fact liberated Ukraine from fascism during World War II. So they outlawed the Russian language in Odessa, where they set fire to a trade union headquarters there. So clearly, these people are very, very far to the right. And we see it in other countries. The former Baltic republics, for example, that had been under Nazi control between 1941, 1944, were liberated, by the Red Army. Yet they bailed out of the Soviet Union and became extremely right-wing during the early 1990s. And they are part of NATO right now. So all these countries have, forsaken their historic responsibility of fighting for socialism and being in alliance with people of the global South. And Russia has maintained its position. They're part of BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Plus Summit. And they do support African governments. They have a close alliance with the People's Republic of China. They work closely with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So they're the ones that have held out, and Belarus. But most of the others have not. Serbia to a certain degree, but they've been fractured. After the early 1990s and the Civil War erupted, that brought about the collapse of the Federated Socialist Federation of Yugoslavia. So yes, that's going to have to be dealt with because these countries that have joined NATO and who are clamoring to join the European Union, they themselves have done nothing except supported the genocide that's taking place in Palestine, in occupied Palestine. It's clear that the Ukrainian government under Zelensky does not support the Palestinians, does support the state of Israel, and is collaborating with the state of Israel. Also, Ukraine is supporting and funding and training these rebel groups that are fighting against the governments of the Alliance of Sahel States. I mean, it was brought out last year that Ukraine had been training the rebel groups in Mali that have made several attempts to seize control of the government in the capital of Bamako. So this is the contradiction that we're facing right now. But the United States is at the center of all of this because they want to isolate the Russian Federation. They want to isolate the People's Republic of China, the DPRK, and Cuba and Venezuela So they do not want any progressive government, even a non-aligned government, which the Ukraine government was prior to 2014. They do not want them to exist. They want all governments in Eastern Europe and internationally to be lined up behind imperialism.
Um, I have to ask this question. I have to ask this question. I should have written this question down, but I do have to ask this as a follow up. Uh, both sides. We have to criticize both sides. The Soviet Union, it was a rival imperialist country that colonized Eastern Europe and Central Asia and whatnot. And you know, you must have heard a version of, you know, neither Washington nor Moscow, neither Whitehall nor nor the Kremlin, neither Beijing nor Washington, no Ottawa or Moscow and so forth like that. And look, I'm not saying that there weren't issues, serious issues in the USSR, in whatever former Eastern communist nation. I'm not saying that there weren't human rights abuses, that there wasn't issues with that there were democratic deficits and all that jazz. And but that's another topic for another day. But that being said, do you want to push back against that thesis that the Soviet Union was a rival imperialist to the capitalist West of the Anglo-American Empire? Why not even throw the American Anglo-Canuck Empire, the Pan-European empires, the NATO nations, and what was developing into the European Union, which I think itself clearly is also a Pan-European capitalist project, largely led by Germany with France as a junior partner. But it's but yeah, but it's imperialism. It's naked imperialism. It's advocating for capitalism, and it wants Africa and Latin America and whatever part of the global South and so forth to continue to be colonial subjects. So yeah, so I'm curious your response to the argument that the Soviet Union was a rival, maybe not rival capitalists, although there are some foolish Trotskyists that did describe the Soviet Union as capitalist. But yeah, what's your response to the argument that some on the left had that the former USSR and the Eastern Communist Bloc were rival imperialists to the U.S. and its allies?
No, I don't believe that the Soviet Union was ever capitalist or imperialist. And I believe they were a socialist country. There were, as you said, there were contradictions. It was a relatively new project if you compare it to U.S. Colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism and imperialism. Yeah, it's quite different. The history is different. Russia historically did not participate in the Atlantic slave trade. They had no colonies in Africa. In fact, even under the monarchy, they had supported Abyssinia in the late 1890s when they were invaded by the Italian monarchy that was attempting to set up colonies in the Horn of Africa, more colonies because they were already in Somalia. But no, I don't agree with that position. Now, China, by the late 1960s, had described the Soviet Union as social imperialists. I believe that was a grave mistake on their part. And we saw what happened there during the period after Mao Zedong's demise. There was a different focus on internal economic development. But they did drop the whole notion of the Soviet Union being social imperialists. And you had some Maoist, so-called Maoist groups in this country who took that position falsely enough. They're pretty much decimated right now. But that's interesting that you should raise the question of the two imperialisms, social imperialism and Western imperialism, because today you still have people who claim that China is imperialist. And there are people who,
Talk about that and why
yeah,
you push back against that thesis as well.
yeah, right. I don't agree with that either. But this is what they're saying, that their involvement in Africa is imperialist oriented and so forth, which is not true. There hasn't been any seizure of land, property, economic resources, and so forth. They put out stories, the imperialists, about a Chinese debt trap, which even Bloomberg magazine, interestingly enough, a few years ago refuted that notion. And
Exactly.
they just forgave, interest payments on a lot of the loans that have been extended to African countries. So no, I don't believe that China is imperialist, or the former Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation today. But in the U.S., you do have those ideas that exist, and this is why there was so much confusion uh, at the beginning of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, is because people were saying, well, we can't defend Russia even on a tactical basis or on a critical basis because they're imperialists too. We don't agree with that at all. The whole idea is to stop the growth and expansion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We know the history of their imperialist entry in Africa and throughout the world. It was NATO that carried out the war against Afghanistan for 20 years. That was an abject failure. And we know it was NATO that was bombing Yugoslavia back during the late 1990s. And it was NATO that was involved in the bombing and destruction of the Jamaharia in Libya. So we know the history of NATO and its destructiveness and its support for imperialism and continuing colonization. So no, I don't agree with those views. And people who advance those type of ideas have been largely paralyzed in terms of U.S. politics.
Uh, any criticisms though that you do have of specifically, yes, well, specifically China when it comes to the issues of imperialism. Now, China, uh, we won't get too much into it, but if people want, I've done tons of interviews and coverage of China with people who are not hostile to China. I largely do agree with them, but I do have some criticisms of China regarding their approach to imperialism. And if we just take the examples, since we're talking about Africa, if we take the examples of Congo, I do wish that China would suspend doing business in Congo, given that it's not a democratic republic by any means, and because of Western imperialism and Western imperialism's proxies with Rwanda and Uganda. Literally raping, looting, and pillaging the country. I do wish that China would not have this, non-interference. We respect the sovereignty of all nations. When Congo's sovereignty is continuously being violated by Western imperialist proxies and so forth like that. So and when we talk about historic Palestine, I know there are some voices, even those who don't think China is a rival capitalist or a rival imperialist, that do wish that both China, BRICS in general, but that China would take a more hard line against Israel and engage in full on BDS and of course those who are very radical on the Palestine question, do wish that China would also advocate the one state solution. And if Israel can't accept that, who cares? Let them go the way of the Pied Noir. When Algeria was finally liberated from the French settler colonial project, what is your response to that? I'm very curious.
Yeah, well, they do criticize U.S. imperialism heavily, and they do support the Palestinian struggle in terms of a two-state solution. I think that's dead. Even when it was attempted, it appeared to be attempted in the 1990s through the Oslo Agreement. It was soon sabotaged by the State of Israel, backed by the United States. So I think that argument of whether or not that should be a unitary state or a two-state solution, I think is a passe argument. It's clear that the Palestinians will not be able to coexist with the settler colonialists. Their desperation, their brutality, their genocidal biddings are known today to the world. So they've disavowed any legitimacy to statehood and international recognition. Uh, all the governments that still recognize them and still support them are going to lose credibility as time moves forward. So, no, I think that China is doing a good job in terms of their criticism of U.S. imperialism and also the role that U.S. imperialism plays in oppressing even the people inside of this country. Every year they do a human rights report on human rights violations inside the United States. But yes, whether they can do more, I'm not sure. But they're definitely holding an independent line against U.S. imperialism. And if you compare the reception of Donald Trump when he went to the People's Republic of China last month to that of Vladimir Putin, it was night and day. So it's clear who their closest allies are, and they're not the United States. In fact, the U.S. needs China much more than China needs the United States. That's why Trump ran there in the immediate aftermath of the defeat in the Persian Gulf. And he's reluctant even today to resume a full military onslaught against the Islamic Republic of Iran. They may have to do it if the conditions here get so bad that they don't see any other outlet. But they were shocked to find out that the Islamic Republic of Iran was capable of defending themselves against U.S. imperialism and the state of Israel in combined attacks. So, yes, I think China is doing a great job in that regard.
Uh, Before I ask you a question about Iran, though, I was wondering, did you hear? Did you hear the news that's been going on in England? So there was a racial harassment hoax, and where this where a Sikh man, a British man of South Asian Sikh background, uh, murdered somebody, called the police and claimed that he was the victim of a hate crime, and the police were arresting the person who was mortally wounded and died from those wounds and his treatment from the police, a white guy. And this has sparked all sorts of riots and very, very nasty, polarizing, and let's not be around the bush, racist debates that are going on with the people with Nigel Farage and the Tommy Robinsons of the world and others saying that this is proof that white people are discriminated against in Great Britannia. I'm curious. I'm just curious your thoughts on what's been going on in England.
Yeah, it shows the volatile racial tensions that exist in the United Kingdom. I saw that situation as it developed, and the young man that was killed, his parents said they didn't want his death to be used to inflame further hatred. And that was the theme in the British parliamentary debate several days ago when the Reform UK leader got up and said that there was two different types of policing that was going on in Britain. One for people of color and the other for whites. Two-tiered policing is the term he used. And it prompted outrage in the parliament, among the Labour Party and the Liberal Democratic Party. Even the Tories, took a similar position as Sir Keir Starmer of the Labour Party. Yet, when you look at the recent local governmental elections that took place in Britain, Reform UK won more seats than any other party. So it's really a contradiction that's going on right now in the UK. The people are moving further to the right. And what do you attribute that to? The failure of the Labour Party to deliver on its objectives. Now you've got a fight, leadership fight that's going on now inside the British Labour Party. And, it's a big mess that's going on there. While the economy showed some signs of growth under the Labour Party in the most recent reports. But no, it's a very volatile situation that exists now, and people were in the streets, the right wing, inflamed by people like Tommy Robinson. And what's interesting is that Reform UK will not denounce the racism of the United Kingdom people and Robinson's English Defense League, which has a different name now, but they won't denounce these people. In fact, they were pandering to what happened the night before. So, yes, it's a very dangerous situation there. And even the Conservative Party is spends most of their time attacking the Labour Party, which is in power. Yet they're actually playing a role that could lead to the adoption of a National Socialist England. If the Reform Party gets in, if they have the support of the ultra right, the violent right, the people who are fighting in the streets, who are attacking Black and brown and Asian people, then it's going to be a problem for the UK as a whole. But it shows the crisis of governance within the capitalist countries, because we have a similar problem here in the United States. I mean, Donald Trump, is an outright racist, a white supremacist, and the people that voted for him said, in essence, that they were concerned about the economy. They wanted to make America great again. Yet the economy has worsened under his second administration. I mean, there have been 140,000 layoffs in the tech field just this year. Manufacturing, you have even more layoffs that are taking place. So where is the economic progress? You have an inflationary spiral that's constantly going up here in the United States. So yes, I think the crisis of capitalism within these Western industrialized states, many people are turning towards a fascist ideology and leaning towards the creation of a fascist form of government. But will that solve the problem? I don't think so. Even for the whites who are advocating this, this is no solution for them either. If they're going to force migrants out of the country, force people to take cover, to eradicate all their rights, it's still not going to help the capitalist system because people are going to fight back, they're going to resist, and this is going to weaken any type of right-wing political dispensation in England as well as in the United States.
One can only hope. Thinking about this tragedy, because I think it's a tragedy. What happened to this poor,
Yeah,
chap, and look, and these things can happen. I mean,
yeah,
I know for a fact you must have lived through the very polarizing New York of the 1980s and early 1990s, where there was a similar racial hoax scandal where this I can't remember what her name was, but a young black girl who claimed that she was sexually assaulted by several whites. Al Sharpton,
mm-hmm.
campaigned for justice, but it turned out that it was a hoax, and it was and for a period of time, it was a very, very bad period for Al Sharpton, who whatever flaws aside and whatever bad politics he engages in now, which is propping up the right wing Democrats and so forth like that, never speaking out when the Democrats do wrong. But that being said, Al Sharpton was, for lack of a better word, a leader of civil rights, of black civil rights in New York during the 1980s and 90s, and and it, but regardless of this, of the racial hoax that that took place, it still does not change the fact that Black people, brown people of the Latinx community, Native Americans, and Indigenous Americans of Alaskan and Hawaiian backgrounds, doesn't change the fact that they are overrepresented in poverty, overrepresented in the injustice system of the United States, the racist system of the United States. Uh, when it comes to the horrific classist anti-welfare laws and so forth like that, Black, Latinx, Native Americans are overrepresented in that. So just because you have the one person that might exploit legitimate racial grievances for whatever cynical reason doesn't change the fact that in the U.S. and certainly in a country like Britain, it's not talked about often, but Black people, are killed, in police custody, and are still overrepresented in stop and search, and are overrepresented in poverty, low life expectancy, and whatnot. There, like in the U.S., there is, a small Black middle class, and there even are a few rich Black people, but that doesn't change the fact that anti-Black racism does exist. And there was another big report that came out some years ago that found that both the police and firefighters have a huge institutional racism problem against all people of color, a huge sexism problem, and a huge heteronormative queerphobia problem. I'm very curious your response to that.
Yeah, that is the reality of what we're dealing with. And even some of those wealthy African Americans have been subjected to racism as well, particularly in Europe. I know that Serena Williams, that was 2 years ago, she had gone to France, and she was there and tried to enter a restaurant. And she was denied admission, Oprah Winfrey had a similar incident in one of these Scandinavian countries. So yeah, it doesn't shield them, from racism. But at the same time, other people are still subjected, to racist ideology as it relates to policing, racial profiling, the beating and killing of African Americans and Latinx people by the police, and also the disparate treatment within the criminal justice system, which leads to high incarceration rates for people of color in the United States. And this country still remains the most imprisoned, has the highest per capita prison rate than any other country in the world. So if this is a democracy, then it has a very curious way of illustrating itself by incarcerating more people than per capita than any other country in the world. So it's in that sense, it's not a democratic society, because
Yeah.
if the oppressed people, many of whom were responsible for building the United States into a world capitalist power, their people are still being incarcerated at an unequal level, highly disproportionate rate, then it could not be a democratic society. If you have poverty rates that have a racial character to them, then that means institutional racism still exists. And it's
Yes,
the
and
same thing in France and the UK as well. In the UK, even in Ireland, Southern Ireland, we saw this Congolese brother who was choked to death right there on the street in the same fashion that George Floyd was 6 years ago. He was screaming, "I can't breathe," and he died. And there's a huge uproar there over what happened. So all of these things are going on throughout the entire capitalist world.
yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up, and again, recent, and again, that is, that is, it just goes to show you, and I say this constantly to to some of my black comrades, or when I hear some stupid comments on threads or social media that, oh, I want to move out of the U.S. and go to Canada, I want to move out of the U.S. and go to Europe where where there's no racism, and I'm constantly having to remind people that the grass is not greener on the other side, whether you're in Belgium, France, Ireland, certainly not the UK, and anti-black racism exists everywhere. The politics of xenophobia means that the first people that are going to be in that crossfire and collateral damage are going to be black people, whether they're whether they're in American expats or some poor immigrants from of the working class. And
Yeah, it's interesting.
that just gets under that just gets under my skin. But luckily, when there was the huge solidarity protest against George Floyd, I was nervous that it was just going to be a bunch of anti-American protests and so forth. But I was very pleased and humbled to hear that the black community across Europe and other people of color, Turkish communities, the broad West Asian communities, South Asian communities, all of those people used the opportunity when they were allowed to speak to say that what happens to George Floyd happens to us here. So white supremacy is not just an American problem, and so that was
Exactly.
so that was good to hear. That was that was good to hear
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, that's very, very important to point out. And in fact, there's been articles written recently that more and more people, not just people of color, are migrating to Canada from the United States because they cannot stand what is going on here in the US during this period. And I've seen others who are going to Europe as well. Now, when they get there, I just saw recently this one woman, African American woman, she was talking about how great it was. She went to, in fact, two of the countries were former socialist countries, to another Mediterranean country, and she was talking about how well the people treated her, and people were stopping her on the street, complimenting her on how she was dressed and so forth. But that's different if you're visiting, or if you have to go there and live and have to compete for jobs, housing, and other things. So yeah, it's quite interesting. But a lot of people do believe that they need to get out of the U.S. at this point and migrate, even if it's just across the border to Canada. And the fact that there's been so much tension between the Canadian government and the U.S. under Trump encourages people to move as well, because it appears as if the Liberal government in Canada stood up to Trump, when he was talking about annexing Canada as a 51st state of the U.S. And, the prime minister did say, no, that'll never happen.
But
So,
but that's
at the Canadian government. So it's very interesting to see what's going on. But the thing about the Trump administration, they're alienating so many people, even the allies of U.S. imperialism, whether it's the U.K., France, Canada, you name it. He's been insulting these people. The Kingdom of Denmark, for example, demanding that Greenland be turned over to the United States for security reasons and for access to strategic minerals. So yeah, there's definitely a mood right now in the States for people wanting to leave and go other places. And African Americans, a number of them are interested in going to relocate on the African continent. Some have already done it. More and more looking to move to the continent to get away from the United States.
But that being said, racism does exist in Canada. Black people
Yeah.
Black people are the second most marginalized, oppressed group after Indigenous people. Canada also has its grotesque settler colonialism, racial capitalism, like the United States, like Australia, like like New Zealand. So again, now if folks do move and they don't experience racism, by all means, that's great. But let's not engage in mythology and the PR of other countries who all have hideous racism, hideous histories of racism, and xenophobia, and and again, if you're a partner in crime, if you're a member of NATO with the U.S., the greatest purveyor of violence, as Martin Luther King Jr. say, please, don't do the free PR of those countries. And Mark
Yeah,
Carney
and
still
even stuff.
and Mark Carney still says that he's going to continue working with the United States because this is the government we have. But no, we're not going to be
Yeah,
the 51st states.
yeah, they're doing a lot of horrible stuff. Like here in Detroit, the Canadian government built another bridge that connects Detroit and Windsor. This is called the Gordie Howe Bridge, after this, the hockey player for Detroit. And the thing is pretty much complete, and it's being held up by the Trump administration. And this would facilitate more trade between the U.S. and Canada, but he's holding that up as well. So these are the type of things that are going on, and even imposing sanctions against allies. Now, the Supreme Court has said that these sanctions are illegal and that the money has to be refunded. But I've not heard about any money being refunded to working people, to civilians, only to corporations. So we'll see if the administration actually does that, because they're digging a deeper and deeper hole financially. And it's the working people in this country that will have to pay for it. Just 2 weeks ago, it was reported that the national debt of the United States now exceeds the gross domestic product. So this is a very dangerous territory that the United States is in. And the administration keeps saying they don't care anything about rising fuel prices, rising energy prices, inflation. They're only concerned about perhaps defeating Iran, which they have not been able to do anyway. So they're creating more and more crisis for themselves. And these are the contradictions within the world capitalist system. Even though the economies are going down, like in the UK, for example, the politics could go to the left or it could go to the right. We've seen that here in the US, that people are delusional and believing they can return to the atmosphere that existed in the 1950s in this country, which, realistically was not a panacea anyway. There were extreme economic problems that existed in the 1950s in the United States, yet they want to believe that everything was just great prior to the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and so forth.
Well, if such a thing ever existed, the moderate Republican Eisenhower, I believe, taxed rich people in the 90s.
Eisenhower?
And said anybody who challenges the New Deal should be barred from politics. So, okay.
So was that FDR or Eisenhower?
Eisenhower.
In the 50s, okay.
Yeah. Taxing people taxed rich people, their personal income in the 90s. And then it was a man called Kennedy who thought that's way too much. And then got it a little bit back down to the 60s. And then Nixon did it in the 70s. And Reagan just 30s, I think, or something like that. So that's interesting in and of itself. I do have to ask this question then. You mentioned Iran.
Yeah.
The Congress and Senate voted to stop the U.S.-Israel-Iran war, or as I call it, the war of aggression on Iran. This is, I thought this was stunning. This is a Republican majority-controlled Congress in the House who surprisingly are breaking rank with Trump and the Israel lobby and the well-funded Iranian diaspora who want endless wars and economic terrorism. Now, what's your response to that? And does the credits for this. Does a lot of the credit for this go to our libertarian anti-war friends like Ron Paul, the American conservative, and far-right voices like Tucker Carlson, MTG, and Ann Coulter? I'm very curious your response.
I think the credit should go to the Iranian people for their steadfast position against U.S. imperialism and the Zionist state of Israel. The fact that they did not collapse, that they were able to inflict damage on Israel as well as U.S. bases throughout the entire Persian Gulf, has created a crisis for the world imperialist system. And people in the United States, even right-wing conservatives, now I think there were four of them that voted in favor of this war powers resolution in the House of Representatives, because I'm sure their constituencies are suffering, that they have to pay the high fuel prices, prices for food, for heating, electricity, education. All of this is going up, and there's more and more alienation on the part of people against the society and against governmental institutions. So that's what I would attribute that to. No matter how many lies that the administration has told since February the 28th, when this whole situation started, the reality is they were not able to prevail. And it has created a lot of economic problems in the States and worldwide, for that matter. And Trump does not want to accept responsibility for that. So yes, some people in his party are turning against him because they know their seats are being threatened as well. He's not going to run for office again. He says he wants to run for office again, but they'd have to pass an amendment to the Constitution, which would have to be validated by the majority of states inside the U.S., unless they're talking about using brute force to nullify or either cancel elections in 2028. That's the only way this could happen. And if they did that, that would create mass protests in the streets. And it would also probably create condemnation on the part of other countries throughout the world, including the United Nations, and even including allies of the United States. So I think he wants to project an image that everything is fine in the U.S., that everybody's getting rich inside the country, but the reality is just the opposite. So this has to go to the Senate, and we'll see what their position will be, and will they abide by it? A war powers resolution, because we're way past the deadline in regard to war powers resolution. So we'll see what happens, but eventually this whole thing has to break down because you cannot have huge price increases, alienation within society, and a decline in the economy, and at the same time trying to wage a war overseas as well. So we'll see what happens. They're threatening to invade Cuba as well. And if that happens, it's going to be even more turmoil in the Caribbean and in Latin America.
Yeah, it's interesting. Very briefly, before I get to my second to last question, is this: do you think that unless there was a huge coalition of the willing on Iran, like with Afghanistan, like with Iraq, in which in which this needs to go into the record, Canada did support the Iraq war. They just weren't open about it, but they did support the invasion of Iraq, including much of the corporate media in Canada, despite the mass protests. Do you think the fact that there wasn't this huge coalition of the willing, like with Libya, like with Yugoslavia, like with Syria, like with Haiti, and again Iraq, that this is why Trump and Israel going into Iran has kind of blown up in their face, because their allies would just prefer the more, color revolution, non-violent ousting of the Islamic Republic of Iran?
I think so. because they've witnessed the failure in Afghanistan. They stayed there for 20 years and ran out of there with their tails stuck between their legs. It was a horrendous defeat. Despite the backwardness of the Afghanistan as a country, the lack of weaponry, and the overall military superiority of the United States and Britain and Canada and the other countries that participated, they were defeated. So looking at that, even Iraq, for example, even though they overthrew the government of Saddam Hussein, we cannot say that was a victory for U.S. imperialism. They still have troops there, but they're not at the same level as they were before. And a lot of the people in Iraq support and defend the Islamic Republic of Iran. So, no, you cannot say that these military adventures were victorious. Even in Haiti, for example, it's still not settled, the political situation inside the country. Kenya had sent police there, several hundred of them, and they're being withdrawn right now. So they're talking about getting some other African country, perhaps Chad, to send its police there to carry out the bidding of U.S. imperialism. So all of these operations, Syria collapsed, but we cannot say that the situation in Syria is stable. It could easily erupt again because of the people who are running Syria right now are Al-Qaeda, and they really have no political base inside the country. So I think these imperialist countries have learned some lessons. They haven't learned that in regard to Ukraine, but in terms of West Asia, I believe they have done so. And that's why Keir Starmer said, he was not going to follow Trump into this war. The Tory party said they wanted to initially. After the first week, they backed away. So did the Reform Party backed away as well. So all of this are lessons. All of these are lessons for the imperialist countries themselves, but they cannot completely give up because there's too much at stake for them in regard to world dominance, the status of NATO, and the overall efforts to maintain dominance on the part of the world imperialist system.
I'm actually going to switch my questions around because I do have to ask this one. How are your comrades at Press TV, the ones based in Iran, doing? And anything you want to say about, Israel's mass murder of everyone, but particularly journalists? And I think the, just the genocidal lashing out that Israel has been doing to Lebanon, we are seeing, I think history is actually already recording at this very moment. This has been the most number of journalists murdered and killed. I'm curious your response. Oh, can you hear me, Abayomi?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, your response to
Yeah, I think it shows the hypocrisy.
Oh, I'm still here. I'm still here, Abayomi.
Yeah, I think this is highly illustrates the hypocrisy of the West. Although they claim they're for free speech and media freedom, the reality is totally different because all the journalists that have been killed in Gaza is a testament to open and free press activity. Not at all. And at the White House Correspondents' Dinner a couple of months ago, they were showing all these journalists going in there. And lo and behold, Trump was sitting there on the dais. So he claims he doesn't like the press. It's fake news. Yet they have him sitting there on the stage. So he's trying to promote these mergers that will even create a worse news situation inside the United States. CBS radio, for example, has been liquidated, no longer exists. Also, the show 60 Minutes, which was never a friend of the people, um, could easily be dismantled. So, in paramount, this merger that's pending right now that Trump is behind could even make it worse in terms of the overall media in the United States. So more and more people have to rely on social media, and even that, there are problems because people can get their accounts canceled, they can have their reach limited. So it's you have to come up with creative means of getting the word out in regard to what's actually happening inside the United States, because the media is becoming even more and more consolidated under this administration. So no, I don't believe that there's freedom of the press, and it's demonstrated by what they've done to media people in West Asia, in particular in Gaza. But people have also been killed in the West Bank. There were media people who were killed in Syria as well. So it's a very difficult, and in Lebanon. They don't want to stop bombing Lebanon. They don't want to withdraw their troops from Lebanon. And these are the Israeli Defense Forces, and they're backed lock, stock, and barrel by the tax dollars of working and poor people inside the United States.
Very briefly before I get to the last question, how are your colleagues and comrades at Press TV specifically doing? The ones that are based in Iran and the ones that also work in Lebanon. I'm very curious.
Yeah, they're doing well, and they have not broken transmission since February the 28th under extreme challenges, but they're still pressing forward. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week coverage of the war and other issues, particularly throughout West Asia.
Just we Press TV then.
Yeah. And others like Al Mahadin, for example, that's a Lebanese-based television and a news website. I mean, there was someone killed in Lebanon recently who had worked for another Iranian progressive television station. But so the killing is still going on. But Al Mahadin is still publishing, so is Press TV on a daily basis.
Yes, and we also hope that all is well, and if all is not well, we hope that all will be well with Dr. Mara Osman, still based in Lebanon. I don't know if she's been displaced or if her if where she lives has been damaged. Julia Chassem, who also has been doing work with Sovereign Media, which Orinoco Tribune and Black Agenda Report are part of. We're hoping that all is well with her, as well as Rania Khalek of Breakthrough News and Rania Masri's family. So we really hope that all is well with them, as well as their comrades and friends and family members in historic Palestine, still facing the genocidal onslaught. And Manar Adley of Minpress News was I believe she was in a very nasty car accident. I believe she still is in recovery. So our thoughts and prayers also with her, and we hope that if all is not well with her, that all will be well with her soon. Final question I wanted to ask you. You mentioned CBS.
Yeah, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Yeah, wow.
What a contradiction. I mean, these are the people that conceal the, conspiracy around the assassination of John F. Kennedy in the 1960s and all the way into the 1970s. They've never admitted, the errors that they made during that particular time period. So yes, now they're trying to break them up. That's how far to the right it has gone. And it's clear, the CBS had ties with the FBI and the Central Intelligence Agency. I mean, we've seen that historically.
You're more, talk about more of your thoughts on what the hell is going on CBS, and explain to our audience, our international ones who might not be familiar with CBS and its history. I think it's an overrated history, but there was a period when they had Edward R. Murrow, who famously took on McCarthy. Folks should watch the film. It's actually one of those few Hollywood films which is actually pretty accurate. Good Night and Good Luck, directed
Shot in black and white.
Directed by George.
And only an hour and a half long. So I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, it's a very great film. Walter Cronkite, who was never, by the way, a flaming left winger, but when he famously went to Vietnam and said that there is no winning this war. Dan Rather, again, was never a flaming leftist or a flaming liberal, but his famous confronting George H.W. Bush and his role in the Iran Contra scandal, and of course, you mentioned 60 Minutes, where during its golden period was with Mike Wallace, but when they were trying to do an expose with a cigarette whistleblower, folks should definitely check out that film, The Insider, where Al Pacino played a Lowell Bergman and so forth. But it's been on the decline for decades, as you mentioned, and there's always been huge scandals at CBS regarding corporate censorship and whatnot. Now, CBS is currently owned by Larry Ellison of Paramount. Late Night with Stephen Colbert has been canceled. Many believe it's because of the liberal politics and satire of Colbert. The new CBS head of the news is this ghastly, wicked witch of Zionism in the West, Bari Weiss, who was a New York Times op-ed writer and editor of the opinion pages at the New York Times, and later she had this pseudo indie far right outlet called Free Press, where she's she's a crusader against wokeness, a crusader against cancel culture, and she spends a great deal amount of time censoring and slandering Palestine justice voices. What's your assessment of what's been happening at CBS with the recent resignation of Scott Pelley, who was a star reporter for 60 Minutes? I'm very curious your response.
Yeah, it's just an illustration, a further illustration of the increasing consolidation of corporate media inside the United States. It's been consolidated for decades, but it's even getting worse right now, where they want to control what is said, even the level of criticism. Now, the criticism is not that sharp anyway. I mean, if you look, there's mainly things such as, Trump needs to get the approval of Congress to carry on the war in Iran. But the fact that they've accepted him as a legitimate head of state illustrates that their criticism does not penetrate too deeply. And they've never been able to reconcile themselves to the Palestinian question. They still believe that the state of Israel has a right to exist and should be militarily and financially supported by the United States and other Western imperialist countries. They still foster the notion that any criticism of the Zionist entity is a manifestation of anti-Semitism. So all of this is going on. And it's the same situation with the BBC and others, in Europe as well. So, yes, I think it's getting worse in terms of what can be seen, what can be said over television networks. They've heavily politicized the Federal Communication Commission, which has always been bad, but it's becoming even worse today as we speak. So, yeah, I think it's a manifestation of what is happening inside the United States. They cannot afford to have open debate and discussion, on these critical questions, whether it's racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, affirmative action, the Palestinian question, the role of imperialist militarism around the world, the police, the role of the police inside the United States. If you notice, 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of discussion over the defunding of the police.
Yeah.
And even abolition of policing inside the United States, because it is a manifestation of the legacy of enslavement and settler colonialism. But that has been shut down, that whole discussion. Even Joe Biden, in his second State of the Union address in 2022, got up before Congress and said, no, we don't want to defund the police. We need more money for the police for greater training, and better equipment and so on and so forth. We've heard that line, for decades and decades. So no, and it's going to get even worse as time moves forward under this administration, and perhaps even under the next administration, because even among the Democrats, a lot of them are talking about moving more towards the center as opposed to moving towards the left.
Yeah. So dark days ahead, and folks should seriously watch. I mean, if you're too impatient to watch a documentary, folks should definitely watch Good Night and Good Luck, and then watch The Insider afterwards, because it does show you this is not this is not a uniquely Trump thing, but this is just par and parcel of corporate media. But I definitely do agree that I do think that Trump is uniquely a belligerent, anti-free speech and hostile and hostile towards the press. So
yeah, even though they use the term free speech, but it's only directed to provide speech for the ultra right. And they've criticized France, for example, Germany, as well as the UK in this regard. But what they're promoting is the Reform UK Party, the Alternatives for Deutschland Party, the National Rally in France. They want free speech for the ultra right, but not for the left and the anti-imperialists.
Well, on that note, we're going to end the program here. So we were joined on this edition of 1+1, our special current affairs edition, with Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan African Newswire and Black Agenda Report. Folks, subscribe to both outlets, donate generously to Black Agenda Reports, and support truly independent media and truly independent anti-imperialist social justice organizations like Black Alliance for Peace, like the Black is Back Coalition, like Sovereign Media, Orinoco Tribune, and Press TV, Al Mayadeen as well, and 1+1. Facebook recently has blocked me again from sharing, so it's very important that folks share widely 1+1. Also donate to 1+1 and to people like my friend Chris Richards of the Eclectic Radical. You know, can't travel to countries, can't do more on the ground journalism unless people donate. So may that be a pitch to folks. So folks, please do that. Okay, so next week, folks. Regardless if I'm in a good mood or not, next week we're going to be covering Namibia. Join us for that. And until then, good night and good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody next week, and have a great weekend, folks. And remember, free Palestine. Have a happy Pride. Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, and power to the people, death to the warmongers, settler colonialism, capitalism, and Zionism. So all my best until then.